the title for today is The Weak Brother. And the passage that we're going to be looking at today is Romans chapter 14. So if you have your Bibles, turn there with us so you could follow along because it's not going to benefit you if you just listen. So please have your Bibles open to Romans chapter 14. And I'm going to ask you guys some very pointed questions about this passage, whether you're familiar with it or not. Romans chapter 14, okay, is a very it's a passage that is often quoted or misquoted, I should say, and we need to actually understand what this chapter is really saying. Because oftentimes we as Seventh-day Adventists, when we talk about the health message or when we talk about the Sabbath or any other issue that we hold as biblical and therefore we follow through with it, our evangelical brothers use this chapter as a means to, disprove what we believe or disprove what we have to do. And so we need to understand this chapter. Okay. So I'm up for the challenge. Whenever somebody tries to challenge us using the Bible, I think that is something that is worth studying and worth looking into and rightly dividing it by God's grace so that we know exactly what the text is saying and letting the Bible speak for itself. Okay, so Romans chapter 14, I would like someone to read verse 1 through 6, I think.
I can read.
Okay, please do.
Receive one who is weak in the faith, but not to disputes over doubtful things. For one believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Let not him who eats despise him who does not eat, and let not him who does not eat judge him who eats, for God has received him. Who are you to judge another servant? To his own master he stands or falls. Indeed, he will be made to stand, for God is able to make him stand. One person esteems one day above another, another esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day observes it to the Lord, and he who does not observe the day to the Lord, he does not observe it. He who eats to the Lord, for he gives God thanks. And he who does not eat to the Lord, he does not eat and gives God thanks.
Okay, so let's stop right there because there's a lot to chew on just in the first 6 verses. Okay, have you guys heard this verse before?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is a verse that is misunderstood. This passage is misunderstood many times. And like I said, this passage is also being used against Seventh-day Adventists when you run into Sunday church people who try to challenge you on the whole issue of what you eat and the day you keep. They say, don't judge, don't place judgment on us. Everyone, is fully convinced in their own mind, and that's that, right? Now, let me ask you guys this question. What do you think that this passage is talking about?
Well, I know what the example you used when people use it against us.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually to say, the fact that we abstain from eating, unclean meats, mainly. They'll say it says that you shouldn't judge based on what we eat. And then also, the day that we keep holy, the Sabbath, they'll say it says you shouldn't judge what day we observe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So, very good. This is do you guys understand how this is being used to argue against the idea of what Seventh-day Adventists believe, right? Like I've run into this with people that I've studied with who are not Adventists. Okay, I've run into this where I study with people who are not Adventists, and they go straight to Romans chapter 14 as a means to disprove what I'm teaching, right? About the Sabbath, or disprove what I'm teaching about clean and unclean meats. Okay. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to nip this head on. Okay. We're going to tackle this head on so that if someone that you give a Bible study with who is not Adventist, okay, brings this up, you will know exactly what to prepare for. How does that sound?
Good.
Okay, good. So what we need to look at is this, okay? Let's just take it for face value. Okay, let's just take it as what the text says, okay? Oftentimes, when we see a passage like this, what do? That gets us into trouble.
Context.
What we
Make
tend to do,
assumptions.
huh? What was that?
Make assumptions.
We make assumptions, okay? Or we try to get super defensive, okay? We try to get super defensive and try to, like, fight our position, okay? And because you want to prove that what we believe is right, and they want to prove what they believe is right, and it's like a arm wrestling contest. Who's going to win, right? And you know what you believe is true, but you want to prove it to them. But that is our gut instinctive reaction. We get super defensive to defend ourselves at all costs. But instead of doing that, instead of approaching it like that, let's just take it for face value, okay? Let's let the Bible bring it out plainly and try to understand what it's saying, okay? And if it is saying something that is something against us, then we have to own up to it, okay? If our evangelical Sunday brothers are right, then we have to own up to what they're saying, if the Bible clearly says it, right? Fair?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's just take this for face value. I think sometimes this is why I'm telling you guys, when you study the Bible, don't study with a filter. You know what I mean by that? Don't study with a filter thinking, I'm going to prove these guys wrong. And I'm going to find out how it's going to be proved wrong. And you have this already ingrained filter and a preconceived idea of what you're thinking. As you're reading through the passage, all you think is, how am I going to prove them right? How am I going to prove them wrong? How am I going to prove myself right? You keep thinking that way. Okay. And remember, what did I say? Approach the Bible with an empty cup. Okay. Don't come with your preconceived ideas. Don't come up with a filter thinking that seeing everything through that filter. But like, honestly, let the Bible speak, and from what it says, then you can actually make sense of it. Okay. All right. So let's take this point by point. All right. Verse 1. It says, it mentions who? Who is it mentioning?
The weak in faith.
The weak in the faith, okay? The weak in the faith. It's mentioned the weak in the faith. Yes or no? For those of you guys that are listening.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Okay, you're following. Okay? What are you not to do with the weak in faith?
Don't dispute over doubtful things.
Okay, okay. You receive them, but you do not get into what?
Disputes.
Doubtful disputes or doubtful disputations. Okay? So, what example does Paul bring out as a doubtful dispute? Verse 2. What's the first thing he brings out? What is the first
What
doubtful dispute? Huh?
What we should eat and
What
shouldn't
we
eat.
should eat. Exactly. What we should eat. Okay, so what is the issue circulating in verse 2? What is the doubtful dispute about eating specifically about?
Vegetables.
Okay, so one believed that he may eat all things, and another who is
Only
weak eats herbs or vegetables. Okay. How do you understand that?
We need to define what is all things.
Okay.
All, or what the Bible prescribes
Okay.
as all.
Very good. So we need to describe, we need to understand what does it mean by all things. Okay. But what does it call those who eat vegetables or herbs?
Weak.
Calls them
They're weak.
Mm.
You know, so they kind of, so like people that think like of Seventh Day Adventists, they think, oh, you guys just eat vegetables, you guys believe in a vegetarian diet, you guys are weak. And what do you say to that? No, we're not weak, we live longer than
David
everyone else.
ate vegetables, or Daniel only ate vegetables, and
Right,
he was not
right.
weak.
So let's take a look at this. Is this, when you look at it from face value and when you're looking at it from out of context, it appears to say that, you know, one who believes, oh, they eat everything. They eat everything. But those who are weak, oh, they only eat vegetables. Okay. So when you look at it from this standpoint, that's what it appears to be saying. Right? But is that what it's saying?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. Good. Very, very honest. Okay, let's look at verse 3. What are those that eat not to do?
Despise those who don't eat.
Despise those who don't eat. Okay, so let him that eats don't despise those who eat not. Right? And what are those who don't eat not to do?
Judge.
Just
Okay, so in the same way, let him which eateth not judge him that eateth.
Hmm.
What has God done for both?
Received him.
He has received them. Okay.
Mhm.
So there's an issue here. We don't know specifically what the issue is, but we know that there's an issue between those who eat and those who don't eat. Those who eat all things, those who eat vegetables. The issue is what? What's the issue?
When the issue here is that what is that he may eat all things? Is that includes the forbidden foods?
Okay, that's a good
But he who is weak, it's only vegetable.
Sorry, from verse 1, I can see that verse 2 is just an example of the things that we should not receive.
we should not receive.
Yeah, because verse 1 says, receive one who is weak in the faith, but not to disputes over doubtful things. So verse 2 is just an example of doubtful things that we should receive.
Yeah, so verse 2 is definitely an example of doubtful disputes. This being one of them. Okay, the dispute about eating.
Right? Yeah. So
Why?
it does not say that there's credibility to this argument. It's just saying that it's one of those arguments that we should not receive.
Okay. Good observation. So it's not necessarily the author is siding with one or the other or saying which one's better, but he's stating that this is a legitimate dispute that the church is dealing with. Okay, so that's very well put. Yes.
I always understood this passage to mean, you know, there's the verse that says, he who knows sin, to him who knows sin, it is sin. You know, for him who doesn't, it's not sin. So, because it says, for one who believes he may eat all things. So if in his mind he doesn't think that eating all things is sinful,
Mhm.
we shouldn't, despise him or judge him.
Right.
And the
Right.
same thing for the day, there are people who are Sunday keepers who are really passionate Christians and really love the Lord, but
Mhm.
they believe in their hearts that Sunday is a holy day.
Mhm.
And, you know, that's how I always took this verse or this
Sure.
this passage.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's very good that you brought up something that is going to be talked about later on in this chapter, and is kind of alluded to. It's all about the conscience of the individual, and that is something that we will definitely talk about. That's something we need to understand as well, um, as Seventh Day Adventist Christians as well, not just with our Sunday brethren, but also within our own church. Okay, and we're going to talk
Mhm.
about that later. So that's a very good thing you brought that up. That's a good foreshadowing of what we're going to talk about, Kristen. Very good. Okay,
I have a question.
question.
Um, so who is this audience that the author is talking to?
So who is the audience that the author is talking to? Okay. Now that's something that we're going to definitely look at, but who is the letter addressed to?
Romans.
Romans?
Romans. Okay.
But are they Christians or, I mean, they're in there, you said church, I don't know why, I just thought Romans. So I guess they are Christians if he's talking to the church people.
So that's a fact, right? The audience. Who is the audience? Are they believers or unbelievers?
Mixture. Paul might be teaching people who don't know the Lord.
Okay.
It sounds like you said, it says weak in the faith. It sounds like it's church people, but so it sounds like that's why I was asking the question. Is it the believers or is it
And that's
half
something
and half?
that's something you need to grasp.
Okay.
So those are very good questions. You're asking the right questions. You need to get to the bottom of that when you study.
Okay.
You need to understand what is the context, who is the audience, what is the author's intention. All those things should be running through your brain, especially when you're reading something out of context like this. Okay. And I really encourage you to take time to read things, not just like in its isolated, you know, not isolated from the whole context of where it's coming from. Because if you do, it robs you from the richness of what the author is presenting. Okay. So definitely this is, just by what we looked at so far and what we mentioned so far, this is definitely talking about those who are in the faith. Okay.
Mhm.
Because it makes a distinction between those who are weak in the faith.
Right.
Right. So if he's saying be mindful of those who are weak in the faith, does that make sense to a Gentile who's not a believer? No.
No.
Okay. So this is definitely the audience, just based on what we see so far. The audience is believers.
Roman believers.
Okay?
Okay.
Believers in the church. Okay. And it says that there's a distinction between those who are weak in the faith. So what is the opposite of those who are weak in the faith?
Strong.
Huh?
Strong in the faith.
Strong in the faith, or what's another word for, instead of strong in the faith, what's another word?
Those who've been seasoned, those who've been
Those who are more mature.
mature. Okay.
Okay, mature. Yeah, season. I get what you're saying when you say that. But so when it's saying weak in the faith, it implies that there's also in the church, there must be also those who are mature, or they have been around longer. Okay. Because weak in the faith are those who just got into the church. They're learning things. They're learning how to live their life. They're like baby Christians learning how to walk in their faith, right? So they're weak, right?
Okay.
And so if you don't know this, look at other passages where Paul uses that term weak in the faith. He also uses that in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and he talks about this same issue about eating in that chapter as well. And he talks about those who are weak. And this goes more specifically into the idea of eating. Whereas in this chapter, it talks about eating and the feast days and things like that. Okay. So take a look at 1 Corinthians chapter 8 as a cross reference. Okay.
Well, this makes more sense now that you can tap into things like who is the audience and who is he talking.
Exactly.
Makes more sense now.
Yeah. And that's what you got to do. Okay. Because if you don't and you try to just go by what you see, you go into this defense mode, you go into this preconceived ideas that's being brought out. You're in panic mode trying to defend yourself when you don't know all these things.
Mhm.
The Bible tells us many people that are unlearned, they wrestle with the scriptures, not knowing. So you guys don't want to be like that. You don't want to be unlearned. You want to learn so that you can truly present things rightly dividing the word of truth. Okay. And part of that involves investigating those things. Okay. So let me tell you this. Verse 2. One believes he could eat all things. Another who is weak believes that he should just eat herbs. Do you know what this is talking about? Because right away in our own modern application, we kind of think of this as, and even our Sunday churches think this wrongly as well. Okay. They think, oh, it's talking about we can eat all things. We can eat all things, anything. Okay. And we're there's nothing wrong with it. But there are those people who are weak who just want to eat vegetables. So, they're weak. Is that what this is talking about?
I don't think
Is-
it's talking about food per se.
Okay.
It's referencing food.
It's referencing food. So is this pitting vegetarians against non-vegetarians?
No.
No.
No,
No.
I don't think so.
Although it may sound like it, right? And people use it that way. Let me ask you this. Is this verse abolishing the distinction between clean and unclean meats?
No.
No.
Oh,
Okay, no. Okay, how do we know that?
because it doesn't say anything
that's-
about specific meats. It says one may eat all things and one may only eat vegetables. Not all Seventh-day Adventists only eat vegetables. Some of them just, stay away from the unclean meats.
So the two
Or-
different,
Go ahead, sorry.
go ahead, go finish. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, so it doesn't distinguish any type of meat from another meat. It's
Mm.
distinguishing all things from vegetables.
Right,
Okay.
that's what I was gonna say, the two groups, you have one groups with the vegetables, so there's no way that they're trying to distinguish between unclean meats and clean meats, because one group is just dealing with vegetables, no meat at all.
I hear what you guys are saying, but how can you prove that?
Well, you really can't.
It says it in the text. It's all
I mean-
things versus vegetables.
Okay, but what does all things mean? How do you know that? How do you know all things means that? Do you have a verse that says that?
Not,
So,
I was saying for the one group, they
No.
probably wasn't dealing with meats, but now that you're talking about it, yes, the other group could have been talking about meats.
so I'm asking these questions not to, prove you guys wrong. I'm bringing these up because this is the arguments that they'll bring against you. You understand what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
what you say is sound, but they're not going to buy it unless you have biblical backing.
Mm.
Okay. And so how do you know that this issue is not dealing with vegetarianism versus non-vegetarianism? Unclean meats are now allowed and clean meats are that distinction is done away with. How do you know that this is not talking about that? Okay. And how can we prove it from the Bible? Okay. And so the only way that we can prove that is to find what?
What all things are.
Find a story where they still chose what to eat after this was said.
Yes. How would you do that, Harold?
I've been searching.
Okay, good.
I can't remember where to search, but I've seen it before.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? You would have to go back to the Old Testament, wouldn't you? Where they talk about different foods.
Oh no, it has to be
It has to
an
be in-
event after this
It
was
has to
Oh,
be
said.
an event
after. Okay,
They
after.
will use the argument that was done away with. That
Yeah.
was under the law of Moses. So Harold's right. You have to find it somewhere in the same location of where Paul's saying this, and the same issues being addressed. Okay, is there anywhere in the Bible where the same issue is being addressed?
Yeah, First Corinthians.
Okay, how can you find something that has something else that's dealing with? Okay, you said First Corinthians.
No, you said it earlier. I thought you said reference to.
Yes, and that's exactly where we see. So the thing is, you need to find another place in the Bible where Paul talks about weak brethren who are weak. Okay, he doesn't just say it here in Romans chapter 14. He says it elsewhere. So you got to do a search for weak. And where does he also mention weak? If you do a search, you find the same word. And surprisingly enough, the same issue is being addressed in First Corinthians chapter 8. Okay, so let's take a look there. First Corinthians chapter 8.
Oh.
All right.
All right.
So First Corinthians chapter 8, and let's read verse. Ooh, this is long. We'll just jump around then. Verse 1 through 1 through 4. Can someone read that? First Corinthians 8, 1 through 4.
Now concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is no other God but one.
Okay, so stop right there. What issue is Paul talking about in regards to eating?
Things offered to idols.
Things offered to idols. Okay, so that's the issue. Things offered to idols is the issue. Okay, the eating of things that are offered to idols, verse 4. Okay, let's read verse 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. 7 through 11. So 7 through, let's read the whole thing. 7 through the rest of the chapter, 7 through 13, because it's all connected. Okay, can someone
However, there is not. Oh, sorry.
go ahead?
However, there is not in everyone that knowledge. For some with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat, are we the worse. But beware, lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died? But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble.
Okay. So the issue is revolving around food sacrificed to idols. Okay. And it mentions the weak brother. Why is the person weak?
Is there a babe in the faith?
Okay, but based on what we just read here, what constitutes one who is weak?
A weak conscience, I think is
Yeah, someone who has a weak conscience. Weak conscience weak conscience based on what? What issue do they have a weak conscience?
food.
Food. What about food makes them weak?
Your conscience being weak is defiled, that food does not commend us to God.
They think one way is wrong and
Okay, so what's wrong?
eating
Eating food offered to idols.
Okay. Yeah. So who thinks that that's wrong?
The weak.
The weak. Exactly. Okay. The weak. Get this. The weak believer. Look at verse 10. For if any man see you which has knowledge sit at meat at the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? And through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. Now, what does that mean?
wow.
What does that mean? This is a very complex situation. But
If someone who believes that eating food offered to idols sees you eating food offered to idols, he may want to do the same, and because he thinks it's wrong,
right,
it will be sent to him.
right. So get this, okay? Here is a weak brother, okay? He is weak. Why? Because his conscience is
Weak.
weak. Okay, now what does it mean that his conscience is weak?
It's just not mature.
It's
He
not
doesn't-
mature. That's what it means.
He doesn't firmly believe anything.
No, he does believe.
Yes, but I mean firmly, like he can be wavered.
That's not what it's talking about here. No,
No? Okay.
not talking about that here. Weak in conscience means that they are not mature enough to understand, and they are very hypersensitive to do everything right as a result of it. So have you run into those people who just got baptized? God bless them. They just got baptized, they're new to the faith, and they are just on fire for Jesus, right? They are on fire for the Lord. They want to live their life according to Jesus, and they want to live their life totally sold out on him. Is that a good or bad thing?
Good.
Good
Good.
thing.
That's a good thing, right? That's good. That's good. But get this. They are so vigilant about doing everything right.
That's good.
That's good. But this is the problem, though. Sometimes we
They
try
burn
to
themselves out.
they are so meticulous to do everything right and do everything right, and in their own mind, in their weak mind, in their early stage mind, where they're still not fully understanding everything yet, they see things through black and white. Okay, they see things through black and white, like what's right and what's wrong. Okay, now what does Paul say about things sacrificed to idols? In verse 4, he says, concerning therefore the eating of those things which are offered in sacrifice unto idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and there's none other God but one.
Hmm.
For though there are called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, there be many gods, many lords, many, but to us there is but one God, Father, of whom all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom all things, and we by him. Right? So in other words, Paul is saying, we know who God is, right? We, as mature Christians, we know who God is. And if of things sacrificed to idols, we know who it really comes from. So even though it's sacrificed to an idol, we don't get like hyper vigilant to say, was this sacrificed to idols? Oh no, if it was sacrificed to idols, I don't want to even touch it. He says, that's not necessary. Okay. He says, that's not an issue that you need to like be fixated on in a hyper vigilant way. Because he says, we know where it comes from. We know who we give honor. We know who we give, honor and thanks to for whatever we receive. Right? So he's saying that it's not an issue about knowing about whether or not that food was sacrificed to idols or not. However, for a new Christian with a weak conscience who sees everything black and white, he's going to be hyper vigilant and he's going to say, wait a minute, was it sacrificed to idols? I don't want it if it's sacrificed to idols. Right? He's going to do that because he's so intent on doing things right that he's going to be hypersensitive to everything that is supposedly bad. Are you guys following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But Paul is saying that's not an issue. That's not a problem. That's like, he says, an idol is nothing. We don't have to worry about these things. However, that doesn't mean that Paul says it's okay to eat things sacrificed to idols. Paul's not saying that. He's saying that if you don't know, don't ask. Okay? If you don't know if it was sacrificed to idols, don't ask. Just accept it as coming from God. Even though those Gentile marketplace people are sacrificing it to idols, but you don't know, so don't ask. For your conscience sake, don't ask. Just accept it as coming from God. But no. The weak Christian, he's like, was it sacrificed to idols? If it was sacrificed to idols, did you know that all the Gentiles, they sacrifice their food to the idols? I don't want to touch anything. I'm just going to eat vegetables all the time because they sacrifice all the animals to their gods. And so I'm just going to eat vegetables. That's what they're thinking. Right? They're being hyper sensitive to do what's right, not fully understanding. Right? Paul also says later on, he says, like, if you go to somebody's house, right, and they give you something to eat, just eat it. Don't worry about it. But he says, if somebody says to you, hey, we're serving this food for you, Paul, but guess what? This food was sacrificed to idols. I hope you enjoy. Paul says, when that happens, when they tell you clearly that it was sacrificed to idols, then for your conscience sake, say, you know what? Thank you, but I cannot eat this. That's what Paul says, right? But if they don't say anything, just thank God for the food and, just go on. So the weak brother here is the one that is very hypersensitive to the idea of food being sacrificed to idols, right?
I have a question.
Now, is that a bad thing? Let me, before you get your question, is that a bad thing that this guy is hypersensitive?
No.
Really?
No, it's not, right? Paul says it's not. And Paul even goes further to say that he says it could be detrimental. Listen, it could be detrimental to that young, weak brother if he believes what he believes, thinking that it's bad to eat anything that was sold in the Gentile marketplace because it was sacrificed to idols. and he sees you, a mature Christian, eating something that was bought from the Gentile market that he knows was sacrificed to idols, right? And he sees you eating that, that's going to really make his mind blown. Like, he's going to be like, wait a minute. The elder of the church is eating something from the Gentile market that was sacrificed to idols. And he's going to go crazy. And he's going to be confused. Is that okay? Is that wrong? Is that right? And that's going to embolden him to think, conclusion, it's okay to eat things from sacrifice to idols.
Right.
So he's going to make that conclusion, which is the wrong conclusion. But that's what Paul says. You, being the mature Christian, you need to be aware of that. And you cannot put a stumbling block on your weak brother.
Right.
Right? So if he believes that, you need to be sensitive to that. And if you see him in the marketplace, you just say, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to buy anything today, or something like that, because that young brother's watching me. Right? It's not saying you're hiding. It's not saying that you're pretending to be something you're not. No, it's that you are trying to not destroy that weak man's conscience. You know what I mean? Because he still needs to develop that conscience to understand the different nuances of every issue. Okay. And so Paul understands the mindset of a mature Christian. He understands the mindset of a weak Christian. And that is what is being talked about here. Okay. In Romans chapter 14. It's not talking about vegetarian versus non-vegetarian. Do you understand? It's not talking about clean meats and unclean meats. No. The issue is talking about things sacrificed to idols. That's the issue. Okay. That involves the weak brother. Okay. All right. Questions or comments?
Yeah, you mentioned about sensitive. How did you get that out of the? How
It's
did
all
you?
in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Read the whole chapter. It's there. I just pulled verses out of what Paul was saying.
I know, but I'm just asking you, what was that you were pulling out? You were saying that their conscience was weak, but how does that relate to hypersensitive? That's what I'm asking. I don't know.
You've got to read the whole thing. Did you hear what Kristen just read?
Yeah.
Were you
Did she
following
say
along
something?
what she read?
I'm sorry, I didn't know. Did you say something about hypersensitive, Christian?
No. Yeah, I did, but I'm actually using my own words to state what was being mentioned in the chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. What part of it that you took out that made you think of hypersensitive?
Look at, I said this before. Okay, verse 7 of chapter 8. Okay,
Mhm.
read it.
However, there is not in every one that knowledge, for some with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. But
read.
food, mhm.
Yeah, keep reading. Verse 8 and 9.
But food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. But beware, lest somehow this liberty of yours becomes a stumbling block to those who are weak.
What does that mean? Tell me what you just
To
read.
me, to me, that means that they are sensitive, but not hypersensitive. They're sensitive to things that, they're really on guard. They're looking at things. So they're sensitive to try to do things the right way for what they feel is right and which is appropriate. But okay, I'm not seeing hyper, like you were saying, oh,
You can use your own words, but I see it as somebody that is weak to the faith that is being vigilant, and they're being very overly self-critical about doing everything right.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's hypersensitive.
Maybe you're
They,
asking
they
how do
want to
you help?
do what's, this is a Christian that is wanting to do what's right and put the best foot forward in everything.
Mhm.
Okay, and that's and they don't want to make a mistake in any way. They want to live up to what they believe wholeheartedly
Mhm.
without completely understanding everything. Okay, and so just understand the concept. Okay, you can use different words if it's not what you think, but it's what Paul brings out here. And this is, and the reason why I'm saying hypersensitive, because this is an issue that's mentioned numerous times that he had to address in numerous letters.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not just like something that was just like a one case situation that was a case study. This happened in Romans, this happened in Corinthians, this happened with all other early churches that were dealing with the same thing. They were having an influx of new believers coming in, and these new believers learning how to adjust to their new walk with Jesus. And there's a lot of things that are still left for them to truly grow into. Okay. But
But I like what you said, that it's not a bad thing. So we won't take away that this is such a bad thing.
yeah,
Okay.
we're not to say, oh man, you're too sensitive, oh man, you're too much, you need to let loose for a little bit. That's not the right way to react to them. Okay, you don't dismiss them for being over vigilant. You don't dismiss them for being sensitive or hypersensitive, whatever you prefer, right? But you understand that they're weak, their conscience is weak, their conscience is still taking everything very sensitively. And so we need to understand that, and we need to be mindful of that. Okay. And so that's what Paul is saying. And I think that's very good counsel. And that is what he's talking about here. Okay. So the issue, if you look at the background, the issue that was pretty prominent during that time, back to Romans chapter 14, verse 2, is not about clean or unclean meats. Because the Christian church, did they believe, is it true that when the Christian church, when Jesus died, that all of a sudden they said it's okay to eat things that were unclean? Like Jesus did away with the distinction between clean and unclean meat, so we can eat whatever we want. We could eat pig, we could eat camel, we could eat all these things. Those things are done away with. Woo-hoo! Is that what it's talking about?
No.
No.
No. How do you know that?
If you look at Acts chapter 10, verse 14, when Peter was asked to, Peter was offered unclean animals, he certainly said, no, I never ate.
So this distinction was still there.
Right, yeah.
Right? So when people use Romans chapter 14, verse 2 as a means to say, hey, the clean and unclean meat distinction has been abolished, so stop making a fuss over this. That is not, that is misusing this text, because this text, what we know is that there was no such thing as any of those things being abolished. We're thinking it from a Christian church context. The Christian believers believe in the Bible. They still follow the distinction between clean and unclean meats. So in other words, this is not dealing with people who eat everything and every kind of meat. This is talking about those who ate still the clean meats, right? And they abstain from the unclean meats. It's still the case. We understand that, because that's not the issue here. The issue is dealing with what? You guys tell me. What's the issue again?
The issue is the mature and the immature Christian.
Okay, well, before that, yeah,
Food,
mature
foods
and
offered,
But
foods
food,
offered to the
food-
food
idols.
offered to idol. Good. So you guys giving me the answer shows me you're following. Very good. Very good. Okay.
I was just thinking about Sister Lee's question, and I think it's more on the application. how I understand it is, how do we help the young convert to mature?
Okay. Well, Paul tells you what to do in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. He also tells you what to do in this chapter. What does he say in chapter 14 of Romans? He says, verse 3. What does he say? What does it say? Someone read that.
Says let not him who eats despise him who does not eat,
Uh-huh.
and let not him who does not eat judge him who eats, for God has received him.
Okay, exactly. So if we could insert the context of what we learned in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, it could be read as let not him that eats things that were supposedly sacrificed by idols despise him that eats things that are not that does not eat things sacrificed to idols, right? And let him which eats not, like the weak brother, he doesn't want to eat those things, let him not judge him that eateth, right? Things in the marketplace. For God has received him, both of them. Okay. So what Paul's saying here is like, don't judge. If you're the weak brother and you're seeing that happen, don't judge that other brother. Okay. And if you are the mature one and you see the weak brother just being like saying, I'm going to eat vegetables all my life, don't judge that brother. Okay. Because why? They're fully, what does it say?
I received both, but
I receive both of them. And in verse 5, it says, let every man be fully persuaded in their own mind, or in other words, in their own conscience. Okay, in their own conscience. So that's the issue, right? So that's so common for us. That's so common for us, and we need to be careful about this. It's so common for us to point the finger at other people when they don't do the things that we think that they should do because we do them. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes.
In the church, we think, oh, I'm a vegan. And look at that person. That person's eating meat. Doesn't he know the health message? I'm doing the health message. That person's not doing the health message. They should know better. What does Paul say? He says, don't judge. Right? Don't judge them. Right? If he's fully persuaded in his own mind that it's okay to eat clean meats, right? Then don't judge him. If that person's fully convinced in his mind to be a vegan or vegetarian, don't judge them. Okay? Because it's different for every one of us. Okay? We're on different areas in our own walk. So don't judge them, but receive them. Okay? Don't let these doubtful disputes be the thing that causes you to have this unnecessary animosity towards each other. Are you following? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is that a message that we all need to take heed to?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And this is what Paul's bringing out. Okay.
Judge.
Yeah. Let's be honest. We have enough on our own plate to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. We have our own stuff. We have enough stuff to worry about on our own as individuals. Why are we taking such interest in other people's lives and judging them because they're not living up to what we think they should do based on what we do? Right? We compare them with us and say, that new person, they don't know all the things yet. And, look at them. They're not doing half as good as what I'm doing. That needs to be done away with. Okay. That should not be. God received that person wherever they're at that moment in their life, in their Christian life. God receives you where you're at, and hey, I need growing up too, right? I have things to work on myself. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yes.
all growing in the fullness of Christ Jesus. So,
Right.
and we're on different walks of life. You can't compare other people just because they don't seem to be at your standard or at your level. Okay. And so,
I've actually seen fights in the church over this,
yeah,
like this what you're talking about.
it's sad.
I remember there was a cookout and someone didn't like the vegan hot dogs, so they brought all beef hot dogs.
Mm.
And in their mind, it was okay because it wasn't pork; it was all beef. But other people were offended, and yeah,
Yeah. And see, that's the thing that Paul's saying too. You know, some people could say, well, I'm going to bring vegan hot dogs then, or I'm going to bring real hot dogs then. And just to spite that other person, right? Paul says, what? Be careful not to use your liberty as a stumbling block for others. You understand what he means by that? Yes. Don't use your liberty, don't use your supposed freedom of what you believe fully in your conscience. Don't exercise that or exert that so much so that you also cause other people to stumble.
right.
Right? So you got to be mindful of other people, right? So say that you are a guy that likes real hot dogs, right? And you know that there's vegans there. You know, you're not going to say, well, I'm just going to put the vegan, the non-ones out there. So if they're vegan, too bad. I'm going to eat this to my heart's content. Instead of thinking that way, maybe it would be, if you're thinking about the other brother, say, you know what? I will just forego my hot dogs this time and I'll eat vegan hot dogs today. Even though it tastes terrible. Right? I'm vegan, so don't judge me, okay? I'm vegan. So. And the vegan person could say, you know what? I'm not. Well, they can't eat the meat, but when somebody else brings the meat, they're not going to say, "You brought the real meat. What's wrong with you guys? This is a vegetarian potluck." Don't say that either, okay?
Yeah.
Just don't let it go. Just receive that person as they are. They're still growing in Christ, right? They're
That's
still
right.
growing in Christ, and you
It
just
happens a lot of times,
it
Pastor.
happens a lot of times.
Yeah, with churches.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially those new ones. They know that according to the Bible, they're not supposed to bring unclean meats. But when they bring chicken,
Hmm.
especially their new ones, you know, the coming into Adventist world.
Right.
I mean, you know, they were shot, and I witnessed one that she didn't return anymore.
Yeah. And that's so sad.
That's very sad. Yes.
Very sad because you know she was doing what she thought would be good because that's
Yeah.
what she likes, and she thought I want to share something that I like with everybody, right?
Yes.
And everyone
Yes.
says, "You brought real hot dogs, or you brought real meat. What are you thinking?" And then that devastates them. You just destroyed that weak person. Okay.
Especially if they don't say it nicely,
Yeah.
and they just say it not
Yeah.
directly to the
It is-
person. That is very disheartening.
Is very destructive. It's very destructive, and they'll never want to come back.
Yes, exactly.
It's very
I
destructive.
have a question regarding that though. So
Yeah.
what do you do if, you know, for example, because this is like the first one that comes to my mind, it's Christmas dinner and someone who doesn't believe in the whole clean and unclean meat thing, they make a big Christmas ham. How do you not be offensive towards them?
Well, there's a
Because
lot of
they're
ways.
that for you.
Well, there's a lot of
Right.
things you could do. You could first of all wholeheartedly thank them for the meal, right?
Mhm.
Thank you so much for preparing this meal. Everything looks wonderful, and you put so much time and effort into this, and I really appreciate what you did. You know, but although I cannot eat it, I would love to partake of anything else that you've made, and I'd like to help in any way I can if you need help with the dinner or whatever. You know, there's ways to do it
Yeah,
in
that's
a
good.
tactful way. You know?
Yeah.
Um, and when you're thanking them for making the meal, you're not saying that ham is okay, right? You're not saying like you, and this is what a weak brother will think, okay? So a weak brother will say, oh, Kristen just thanked that person for making ham, right? How dare she do that? Doesn't she know it's unclean? Right? That's
Yeah.
what a weak person will think. Now, they don't understand fully, right? But it's not about the issue. It's about the person, right? It's about the other people. You're just trying to receive them as God has received them, right?
And if they eat it, if they coming to over bringing the dish, the ham over to Christian's house,
Yeah,
then it they could eat it, but you can explain to them, they might say, why you're not eating, and you can explain to them, you don't eat ham or pork,
yeah, yeah.
and just let them enjoy it because that's what they came to
Sure,
eat.
sure.
And it's still not it still shouldn't be an issue. I do that all the time. Some of my relatives don't eat, but they don't eat the same thing that I eat.
Mhm.
They eat pork and everything, but over the years, they have adjusted to making sure that they have clean meat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And soon, guess what? This is so sweet. Like I've run into this with other Sunday church people who brought meat and stuff. They knew I was vegan, and I just graciously thanked them for the meal, but I couldn't eat. And you know what they did? Because they're so loving. The next time I came, they actually made vegan options.
Mhm.
They made vegan options for me, right?
Mhm.
And they're being very mindful. And so if they can do that for me, we can definitely do that for another brother or sister who are not of our persuasion, right?
Right.
Because in Romans chapter 14, it also talks about a day, right? Um, verse 5 says, one man esteems one day above another, another man esteems every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regardeth the day regardeth unto the Lord. He that regardeth not the day, the Lord he doth not regard it. Okay, so what is this talking about? Some people think that this is talking about Sabbath, right?
Mhm.
And some
Feast
people say,
days.
and some people say, oh, this is dealing with, oh, if you keep Sunday, don't judge those who go on Sunday. If you go on Friday and you're a Muslim, don't judge those who go on Friday. Let everyone go whatever's fully persuaded in their own mind. Other people say, I go every day. I worship God every day. And God bless them for saying that. But this is not talking about Sabbath, as many people think. Okay. If you look at the context, all right, this is talking about the ceremonial Sabbaths or the feast days. Okay. Or the days that they choose to have these feasts, or the day that they choose to have these fasts. Okay, you'll see this. I'm just going to throw some verses out for you. Colossians 2:16, 1 Chronicles 23:31, Leviticus 23:24 and 25, and Leviticus 23 verse 4. Okay, these are all talking about the various feast days or ceremonial Sabbaths, which were not specific to a day that they were to be kept. Okay, you can choose to have this feast day anytime that you see fit. Okay, some people say, well, we're having it on this day and they're having it on that day, and we're better than them because we're having it on this day. And that's what they were doing. Okay, they were making an issue about which day should be kept, or which day is more suitable to be kept, and who's better for it, for keeping a certain day over another day. This is not talking about the weekly Sabbath day, okay, as many people think. Um, this is not talking about. It's talking about the days that you choose, that you see fit to observe these festival days. Okay. So what Paul is addressing in this issue of chapter 14, he's addressing issues of Jewish practices that are negotiables. Okay, they're negotiable, right? Like whether you eat things sacrificed to idols or not. Okay, that's negotiable, but you got to be careful not being a stumbling block. The day that you choose to do a feast day, that's negotiable. Okay, that you could choose whatever day you want. Don't judge other people based on whatever day they choose to observe it. Okay, but the things like the moral law, the Sabbath, clean and unclean meats, these are all non-negotiables. Do you understand?
Mhm.
They're non-negotiables that were outlined by the Bible and given for a reason. And these are not what is being spoken of here. What's being spoken of in Romans chapter 14 is negotiables, issues that are negotiable.
Mhm.
Okay. And so that's what we need to understand. And we didn't have time to go into this as much because we were getting a lot of good conversation here. But does that make sense for you before we wrap this up?
What text did you mention we could go to regarding the observances of the feast days plus fasting days?
Okay, so I'll just type it out there. I'll repeat it as maybe Jeff can type it out as I'm saying it.
Mhm.
But there's Colossians 2 verse 16, which talks about the feast days. First Chronicles 23:31. Leviticus 23, 24, and 25. And of that same chapter, Leviticus 23, verse 4. Okay. These specifically talk about the feast days, the fast days, ceremonial Sabbaths. Okay. So that's what is being talked about here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So the I guess the take home message for what we learned today is that we need to be understanding of the weak brother. Okay. Do you guys understand that?
Mm.
The weak brother or sister. Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Right? Do you remember Paul saying that?
Mhm.
Yeah, but we need to be sensitive. We need to be sensitive and mindful of the fact that there are brothers and sisters in different areas in their Christian walk. Okay. For example, I was I don't know if you guys have been in the class where there's a teacher there's one teacher in one classroom teaching different grade levels, right? So you'd have some fifth graders in the class, you'd have some first graders in the class. That's all in that same classroom. It's a very small school, right? And they didn't have enough teachers, but they have all these other students from different grade levels. So she has to teach all the grade levels, in that classroom.
Multi-grade school.
Multi-grade school, thank you. You don't expect the same performance out of a fifth grader as you would from a first grader in that same classroom, would you?
No.
No, right? In fact, it'd be really it would be terrible if someone, berated a first grader for not being able to do fifth grade work, right? Same thing with siblings in a family that has large age gaps. We don't call the baby dumb because it's not performing at the level of the oldest middle school child in the family, right? The oldest sibling knows more, has more experience with the parents, knows the expectation of the parents, yet should be kind and understanding to the new baby in the family with gentleness and love. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? So in the same way, the church is the same way. We have all these people coming into the church that are of a different level. They're new, they're fresh, they're learning how to walk with Jesus. We need to understand that and be mindful of that. Okay? And do what we can to nurture them, and at the same time be mindful of not putting a stumbling block in their way. If you want to understand more about what Paul was talking about with the issue of food sacrificed to idols and the stumbling block issue, that stumbling block issue applies to anything and everything that could be a potential doubtful dispute. Okay? So just read that chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 8, along with Romans chapter 14, and that'll give you a bigger picture of what's being dealt with here, the issue that's being dealt with here. Okay?